Welcome back, accounting boffins. We're busy with accounting examination questions. Once again, just an indicator for you in terms of paper 1 and paper 2. Remember, in paper 1, you're dealing with financial reporting and evaluation, whereas in paper 2, you're dealing with managerial and cost accounting, as well as internal auditing and control. We did say there could be integration with regards to GARP, ethics, IFRS, etc., etc., etc. Okay, here we go. When you are dealing with stock in a manufacturing concern, right, there are 4 accounts that you deal with. What are the 4 accounts? Number 1 is your finished goods stock. Number 2, your raw materials stock. Number 3, your indirect materials or consumable store stock. And the 4th one is your work in process stock. Right, okay, so now, when you're dealing with finished goods stock, what are we dealing with? These are products that are completely finished and are ready for sale. In other words, these goods are the same as the trading stock of a retail business. In other words, these are goods completely manufactured, waiting in your warehouse, ready to be sold to the wholesalers. They are the trading stock that you've completely manufactured. The same as a trading stock of a normal retail concern. Keep that in mind. That's what we mean by finished goods. Okay, the next one is your raw material stock, the unprocessed materials used to produce finished goods. The finished product of a company can be the raw materials of another company. Example, flour produced by a company will be the raw material for the company that produces cakes. Simple. If you look at it this way here, your raw material stock is what you're going to be using to manufacture your product. So the example that we gave you here is that flour is manufactured in the mill. It would be their finished product, but for you as a bakery, it would be part of your raw materials in terms of processing your baking that you need to make in terms of bread and cakes, etc. So just keep that in mind. Okay, the indirect materials account that we're dealing with here is the stock that has not been used but is available for use. Example, your cleaning materials, right? These are indirect materials, okay? How they are apportioned, whether they are used in the factory or they are used in the selling and distribution part, or whether they're used in the admin section, will depend entirely on the question. You will be given a heads up as to how to use it. Your work in process stock account. This guys is the most important. It's your manufacturing account. In other words, it deals with the following. Number 1, products that have not yet been completely turned into finished goods and are still in the manufacturing process. These goods are partially completed at the end of the accounting period and are worth more than your raw materials. So in other words, these would be your opening and your closing balances in your work in process account. Remember, when you walk into a factory at the beginning of the year, you get some goods that are not totally manufactured. They're in some state of manufacture. And by the same token, at the end of the financial year, you're going to get some goods that are not completely manufactured. So your work in process will have an opening and a closing balance. Right. If we now look at our information, we are told that Sikhle Sengwani owns 2 separate factories that manufacture products according to orders received. There is no work in progress stock. The year end is the 28th of February. So in this case, they're telling you there is no work in process at the end of the year. All right. Indicate whether the following statements are true or false. Okay? The wages of the factory cleaners is a direct labor cost. Okay? Think about it. Wages of whom? The factory cleaners. That means they're not directly involved in the manufacturing process. Therefore, you can clearly see this is not a direct labor cost. So therefore, the statement is false. If you have to correct this statement, what will you say? You'll say wages of the factory cleaners is part of factory overheads. Okay, next one. Delivery costs of finished goods to retailers are selling and distribution cost. Okay, delivery cost of what? Finished goods certainly would form part of your selling and distribution cost. So obviously this one will be true. The next one we have here, indicate whether the following statement is true or false. Depreciation on office equipment is an administration cost. Think about your 5 cost accounts, right? You got direct material, direct labor, factory overheads. Those deal with production. Then you got your selling and distribution and your admin cost. Those deal with the profit and loss. Okay, so now this question says depreciation on office equipment, part of admin cost. Certainly this is true because your office equipment is used in the office. It's part of administration. Therefore, that cost component would fall part of your administration cost account. Okay. We now have to complete the factory overheads cost account note. This is the information that we have. We have indirect labor, depreciation on factory plant, advertising, water and electricity, rent expense, insurance allocated to the sales department, and your factory sundry expenses. Okay. We know that we are told the following adjustments to factory overheads must be taken into account. Water and electricity for February 2020, 18,000 Rand must be taken into account. 80% is allocated to the factory. The balance is an administration cost. Okay? Then we are told that the rent must be allocated according to the floor area. 810 square meters for the factory. Office 180 square meters. Sales department 90 square meters. 75% of insurance must be allocated to the factory. The balance applies to the sales department. Okay, let's go into the adjustments and see how we now have to deal with each of the items. Right, if we take our factory overheads cost, firstly, let's pick up the indirect labor. There was no adjustment for it. Therefore, it will go as is. Indirect labor, let's identify. Indirect labor is part of my factory overheads. An example of indirect labor would be the factory cleaners, the factory foreman, right? People working in the factory but not actively involved in the production process. They're not part of the production line. Therefore, that cost component will go to factory overheads. So we've got indirect labor, and there we go, 296,500. The next one we have here is depreciation on factory plant. The moment you see the word factory allocated to a cost, immediately tells you that that has to do with the factory and therefore a factory overhead. So therefore we take it and include it in my factory overheads. Depreciation on factory plant 166,000 as per the given information. Now we come to the first adjustment. We are told about the water and electricity. There's an amount of 18,000 Rand outstanding. So step number 1, look at your water and electricity. Firstly, pick up the amount from the given information, 248,000. So we start off with the 248,000 plus the 18%. However, if you look at the adjustment, we are told that only 80% is allocated to the factory. Therefore, what are we going to do here? We're going to take the figure of 18,000 Rand, right? Let's do that. 18,000 Rand times the 80%, okay? And that will give me a figure of 14,400, right? So now, this figure actually gives you the 14,400. Let me just show you the calculation so you can see. If you take the 14,400 plus your 248,000, right, will give you a figure of 2,622,400. So we've got the total watt in electricity, right guys? Let's just do this again. That component was the 14,400, but the 248,000, we didn't take that one into account. So if you take 248,000 times your 80%, okay, that gave you 198,400 plus 14,400. This will then give you 212,800. As you can see, there's my... So this watt in electricity figure of 248,000 was the total amount. You had to take 80% of that plus 80% of the 18,000 to give you your 212,800. So in other words, what are we saying here? Look at the expense and then allocate it according to the different department. Is it a factory? Is it admin? Is it selling and distribution? So there's your water and electricity sorted out. Next one that we have there is that your rent must be allocated according to the floor area. Once again, what we do here is take your factory rent. Now, the simplest way of doing this is to take your factory rent, which was 345,600, okay? Take your 345,600, tell yourself, how many square meters do we have in total? Right? Here we go. Let's look at our square meterage. It will be 810 plus 180 plus the 90 will give me a total of 1080. So what do we do now? You take the full amount that you have here. As you can see, 345,600 times 810 over 1080, and that will give you your 259,200. So what do you take? You take the rent amount and you find out what square meterage was used by the factory over the total. And that's important. Watch. It's 810 used by the factory out of a total of 1080. That gave me the 259,200. Okay. The next one was the insurance one. What were we told about the insurance? Let's look at the insurance. 75% of the insurance must be allocated to the factory. The balance applies to the sales department. Okay, now in terms of my information, I'm told here that, here we go, insurance allocated to sales was 12,600. So here, if you're doing your calculation, notice that the 25% was equal to the 12,600. You wanted the 75%. Therefore, you take the 12,600 times 75 over 25. Watch this one here, guys. The amount that was given to you for the sales department, this is important. 75% of the insurance must be allocated, but this is the important figure. Watch here. Insurance allocated to sales. In other words, this is your 25%. Can you see that? So when you are doing your calculation, remember it's 12,600 times 75 over 25. You've got the 25% as your known. You want the 75%. Therefore, you do that calculation to give you the 37,800. Add your total factory sundry expenses, and your total amount is now 1,080,000. Okay. Yes, we have additional information here with regards to our desks and our chairs, right? There's selling prices. We are now expected to calculate the total cost of production of finished goods. What will we take into consideration? One, you take your three components: your direct labor, your material, and your factory overheads. Watch here. If you're taking your material, they told you was 3,060,000. So there we go. You got your direct material. Your direct labor was 1,440,000. Let's see how we're going to identify our labor. There's our labor. They told you it's 160 Rand per unit, right? And we also know that we manufactured 9,000 units, right? Okay. And if you now take the 9,000 and you multiply it, you're going to find that you're going to get your figure of 1,440,000 as your direct labor component. And remember your factory overheads, you've calculated your factory overheads to be 1,080,000. If you now add the three components together, right, you have your 3,060,000, 3,060,123 plus 1,440,123 plus 1,080,123. This will give you your total cost of production of 5,580,000. Okay, we have to calculate, do a calculation to confirm the break-even point. Firstly, what do we know? What's our break-even point? Let's look at the financial indicator. It's your total fixed cost, right, over your contribution per unit. What is your contribution per unit? Selling price per unit minus variable cost per unit. Let's look at it here. In terms of our required, there's your total fixed cost, right, which has the two components, which would be your fixed cost will be your factory overheads plus your admin cost. Add the two divided by your contribution per unit. What do we know? Our selling price per unit, right? Let's find our selling price per unit. Here we go. 390 is my selling price per unit minus my variable cost per unit. Again, let's identify my variable cost per unit. Here we go. There's your variable cost per unit. If you add, you're going to find that if you add this here, your three components, 250, 310, 250, 310, 380. Let's see if we have that figure as let's not go, no. Let's get our figures right. Our variable cost will be material 1. Let's use a different color, guys, so we can clearly identify our variable cost. It's my material as my variable, my selling and distribution. Oh, but it's given to us. We don't have to calculate it. Sorry, here's it, guys. It's given to us. There it says total variable cost. I'm just saying, let's just identify this quickly. What are my variable costs? Material is variable, labor is variable, and selling and distribution are my variable costs. What are my fixed costs? Admin costs and factory overheads. But look, in this question, they gave you the total variable cost, so you can see it. There it is. 305. Therefore, in my calculation, it's my selling price per unit minus my variable cost per unit to give me a total of 18,070. Look at my information. Here we go. There is my break-even point. So what have I done? My calculation has proved that my break-even point is correct. To conclude this segment, very important, know your break-even point. Also know what it means. What does the break-even point mean? It means the point at which your profit or loss is equal to 0. So if you manufacture above the break-even point, you're making a profit. If you manufacture below the break-even point, you're making a loss. So what is my break-even point? Once again, it's my total fixed cost, which is my factory overheads, plus my admin cost divided by selling price per unit minus my variable cost per unit. Another name for that is called the contribution per unit. Okay, guys, let's take a break. When you come back, we'll look at another examination type of question. See you just now.